Welcome to Coffee and Contemplation. I'm Robin.
I'm Justin.
And I'm Heather.
And today we'll be discussing Chapter 4, the Sauna Test.
Yes.
So this is actually a first. This is our first trio episode of Coffee and Contemplation. So thank you guys so much for coming on to this. Is going to be great.
Thank you for having us.
This is fun. I'm excited.
Yay. Justin is yet another Stevenson/Village Woolley College alum. I think one of the first things we worked on together actually was my first short film that I directed with Jenna, actually. And you played the lead in that film, The Stranger.
Which still lives on to this day.
Yeah, it's still racking up views on YouTube. I'm shocked.
Yeah.
Oh, that's awesome.
Which is so cool. I have been a storyteller through film since I was probably 7 to 10 years old. I've also kind of grown up being an actor as well. I've done both theater and film in the last 15 years. Short films and also feature films as well. Community theater and professional theater, so I've kind of gotten a little taste of all of it. I've also worked behind the camera, having my own business in videography and editing, but where my real passion is narrative filmmaking in the genres of sci-fi and fantasy. I love creature thrillers, which is right up this alley, and suspense. So combine all those and you get Stranger Things.
For me, I grew up super into musical theater. That was like my thing. I a lot of music as well. I did choir, and that was kind of my focus. And when I went to college, I actually studied theater performance, just straight acting. And so I love that. In Stranger Things, the acting is just absolutely excellent. I think once I married Justin, because Justin and I are married, my nerd card really came out, and I fell in love with Marvel. Definitely Legend of Zelda. So I went from theater performer to now I'm a Twitch streamer and a cosplay artist. Kind of grows into Stranger Things, and the script writing is something that I'm really passionate about. I love script writing. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's probably good.
So kind of on that note then, what exactly is your history with Stranger Things? How did you find it? How did you come to it? And then also, generally speaking, how did you feel about the third season?
I heard the buzz from all of my friends and fellow film people, both filmmakers and film enthusiasts alike. I remember the night that I finally sat down. I went over to a friend's house, and I was with you, Heather. We went over to Luke's house.
We had just started dating. Yeah.
It was Halloween night.
It was. We stayed up all night.
We were hooked instantly. We didn't realize that we were going to stay up all night long to watch the whole thing. Just wanted more. I kept wanting more of these characters.
I can't believe it was that long ago. Yeah. I'm like in shock over that.
But on that note, coffee selections.
Oh.
So our coffee selections for today. I once again have a beverage from the Frederick Coffee Company. I decided to try the Dirty Hippie today, which is just a dirty chai. It's quite delicious.
I have a Sprite because I'm pregnant and I have to drink something decaf. So lovely decaffeinated, bubbly Sprite.
Well, I do have a coffee. McDonald's caramel iced coffee. I also have a LaCroix. You can also say LaCroix, or La Croix.
Now that we've acquired coffee, let's proceed with contemplation. So at Max's house, Eleven brushes her teeth when she mulls over her visions and her encounters with Billy and Heather. After that, Max assures Elle that everything's okay, despite Eleven's concerns, and then they shift into reading a Wonder Woman comic. If I was doing like a thematic reading of this episode, the theme would be balance, because the thing that I think it starts right here, so many times throughout this episode, you get these examples of two characters both being right. Max isn't wrong, she's right. Like we saw Heather, she's fine. We have no reason to be concerned. Like this must have been what happened. It makes logical sense. But we also know that Elle is right. Like we know through dramatic irony, but it's a reasonable perspective. Meanwhile, over at Mrs. Driscoll's house, the paramedics try to restrain her while she resists, screaming and repeating that she has to go back. Nancy and Jonathan watch as the ambulance pulls away, and Callahan, first time we've seen him this season, asks them for an explanation. And as the ambulance drives by the mill, she's reaching out. I don't know about you guys, but all the stuff with Mrs. Driscoll is really sad.
It is.
Like, it's hard to watch, not because it's, like, gruesome, at least not yet, but it's just so sad.
It is.
Yeah.
The victims that have no control and have no need in the story except being victims. It's just
right.
It's sad.
Yeah.
And then we get this like sort of match cut where Tom Holloway wakes up and he's gagged and tied up next to his wife, and they both plead with Heather in heartbreaking fashion, but Heather simply says that there's no stopping it, and then Billy advises them not to move. They walk out, and as the mind flayer emerges from the shadows, now in wretched physical form, and shoots out tendrils onto the captured Holloway's faces.
And sucks their souls.
And this is really, like, it occurred to me that how horrible this is, especially for the Holloways, because basically their entire family gets
so gross.
Flayed.
And then, title sequence.
Oh, yeah, that's a lot before the title sequence. It was a little jarring for this episode, I felt like.
And we come out of that title sequence where Joyce tends to Hopper as he wakes up and he's in a lot of pain and then promptly throws up. Even though they address the impossibility of Joyce moving him, like Jenna pointed out last episode, that how
did he get there?
How did she move him? And I even thought in watching chapter 4 that could have been really damaging depending on what kind of injuries he sustained in that. I won't even call it a fight. He just in that beat down,
knocked out.
Yeah. But as Hopper gets up, they theorize about the Terminator's identity and what he's doing there. And Hopper is asking pretty legitimate questions, and Joyce asks if there's any way to trace the half-missing license plate numbers, to which Hop scoffs and dismisses all of this at first, saying that she should stick to sales, until Joyce adds that the Terminator was on a motorcycle. And I stand corrected. In chapter 3, she didn't get the exact numbers, but I still think it's a little iffy. I said there's no way she could have seen those numbers from all the way, but she's a little bit iffy on it, and I'm like, all right. I stand corrected. Yeah. All right. Back at Max's house, she and Elle both ignore Lucas's frantic signal over the walkie-talkie, but then when the phone rings, Max jumps up to answer it, and Mike manages to hold her attention long enough to insist that she and Elle come over because something's happened. And Max seems to buy it. I mean, she looks spooked anyway. I'm gonna guess that Max is supposed to have the intuition that Mike just sounds different, that his tone sounds more like how he sounded in the previous year. But I don't know about you guys, but
that moment didn't sell for me.
Yeah,
like acting-wise and script-wise, that was a one moment where I was kind of like, if she really is trying to like shut them out, he would, in my opinion, he would need to do a little bit more to make her change her mind.
I do appreciate that she didn't just slam the phone down, which then leaves Elle and Max, again, clueless as to what's going on. At least that she heard him and had a tone change, and like, from the acting standpoint, I agree with you.
And for me, the acting standpoint,
he has to say something, use more force or something to keep her from hanging up that phone, because she's already so adamant about turning the walkie-talkie off.
They're all fabulous actors. In my opinion, a really good actor can take a really crappy script and do something with it. In that moment, he actually didn't sound urgent enough for me. Like when he says the words life and death situation, I would have liked him to articulate it a little bit more, make it a little bit more intense. He just felt like he was frantically just trying to get her attention, which is, in my opinion, good to start because you're just trying to get her attention. But at some point, you got to narrow in on what's the point.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, my like script doctoring approach would have been that, because he says something big happened, and that, so then her response to me, her natural response would have been, yeah, something big did happen. We dumped your asses, like something like that.
Exactly, yeah.
Because she has no clue that this is it deals with the bigger picture. So for them, it's like it's still this feud between the boys and the girls. You know?
Right. If Mike had said just Will sensed something, that would have gotten her attention.
Exactly.
I agree 100%.
Given some context,
yes.
Okay, life or death situation, are you just trying to get our attention here? Like, that's how I would have taken it. But if you'd said something like that, we're like, Will is sensing something is back, that's when they could be like, okay, there is something weird going on here.
And I've seen this, not just in this moment, but in other shows as well, where it's just say what you're trying to say, get to the point. And I know some of it's meant to be kind of, I guess, leaving the suspense in the air, but sometimes we can see through that.
The only reason that I kind of buy this is because it occurred to me that if what they're going for, and maybe just didn't quite get there, was this idea that maybe Max still feels a little bit of FOMO. And so this idea that she's still like wants, because that was something I noticed in her expression, was it looked a little, it was reminiscent of season 2.
Yeah. Yes. Oh, I could totally see that. Yeah, I could buy that.
I don't necessarily think we have like hard concrete textual evidence for that, but that's kind of what I'm like,
that makes sense.
Sure, let's go with that.
It makes sense. If she still wants to be, part of the team.
That is such a good point, because I feel like as the season goes on, she goes from wanting to be a part of everything to like, I don't like that the reason I'm a part of everything is because of my brother, basically. Like that seems to be a thing for her throughout the season that she internally is battling with. So that's kind of an interesting point. I kind of like that.
Yeah. It's flimsy, but I'll take it.
Yeah.
But and then at the Wheelers, Mike urges Lucas to try contacting Dustin again, but to no avail because Dustin is doing more spycraft. There's a great crane shot that scales the building up to Dustin, where he's monitoring them with the binoculars, and then that's when he goes back down to Scoops Ahoy, back to the room that he and Steve and Robin start to formulate a plan to get inside the shipping room, and Steve proposes that he could just take out the armed guard. But Dustin recounts Steve's record of losing fights, and Robin gets an idea, jumps up and grabs the cash from the tip jar, and tells them to hold down the fort. She'll be right back. I've always hated this moment in the past, and I still don't love it, but this time I actually found it, like, weirdly adorable.
Yeah.
Like, he's acting kind of like a little kid.
Totally.
Yes.
To me, it seemed a lot like that big brother trying to impress my younger brother. Like, I can take him, and I can. But at the same time, that switch of who's really the older brother here, who's acting
in that moment,
realistically.
I can do this. I got this.
Well, and I noticed that he says it directly to Robin. He doesn't look at Dustin when he's like, he says it, I could take him out. Like, directly to her.
Yeah.
So it occurred, and she's like, oh, okay.
It almost feels like he's trying to impress her.
Yeah.
That's what I thought it was, too.
That's what Steve does. Like,
exactly.
Anytime there's a girl around, he's like...
He's been doing that since season 1.
Well, and even with the trajectory that his relationship with Robin does take, I still kind of like, that doesn't bother me.
Right.
That it doesn't have that like false lead vibe.
Yeah, I agree. Sure. I thought it felt like...
It's very consistent.
Because of his eye contact, you could tell it was to her, but the way he said it didn't feel like overly flirtatious.
No.
Yeah.
No.
Which would have probably been very annoying.
I'm part of this adventure. Cliche. I'm in. I'm part of this.
Yeah.
Like, I could totally do. This is what I could do. This is what I could bring to the table.
He's like, just so you know.
I mentioned it already. I like that Robin looks skeptical immediately, even before Dustin asks, "Have you ever actually won a fight?" Like, she already knows that he's trying to act tough, and I think that's fine.
Yeah.
What I don't like, though, is that there is no acknowledgement that Steve did beat the Demogorgon and did take on several Demodogs in the junkyard. It's not the same thing as taking on another person like Jonathan or Billy, but he did that.
He can hold his own.
Yes.
Yeah. He can hold his own. I don't know if they were trying to downplay Steve in this
in my opinion, this was a little bit of a cop-out for a comedic moment.
Yes, I 100% agree.
It could have been fleshed out more, where we could have not just seen Steve's cockiness, not just seen the younger brother pick on Steve. Like, there could have been a little bit more heart in this moment that wasn't quite there. But
well, he could have thinking like from a script acting perspective, I'm kind of like, well, to me, rather than have him going like, that was one time, like, to me, he would have defaulted to like, yo, I took those beatings though, and I saved Lucas and Max and Mike and you, P-Brain, so show some appreciation for my getting my face bashed in. Also, I walked away though.
Yeah,
like
right. Yeah, totally. Especially something to point out the fact that I got my face beat in for you, Dustin.
And, like, kind of to Dustin's point, like, even if Steve had won those fights, like, let's just say Billy, like, he had beaten Billy. We're talking here about an armed guard.
Right.
With, like, military training.
Yeah.
So, like, I feel like, and that's kind of to your all's point, like, that's kind of what Dustin is saying initially. He's like...
Have you forgotten the part where I said, big gun?
About the armed guard.
Yeah, right.
So when Steve doesn't respond to that, he's like, all right, then let's take a look at your fighting history. But
I think it would have been really nice to bring in, like, well, what about the Demodogs? What about my baseball bat?
It still could have been
it could have been funny back and forth.
A funny moment where if he just starts sitting there kind of nonchalantly listing off Demogorgon, Demodogs, this, I saved you here, I saved them. Even while they're starting to try to say something else, he's still there, like, counting off the things that he's done. Are you guys listening to this at all? Like, they could have still made a really funny moment out of that.
that we have to take this moment to step aside from like the actual legitimate threat to laugh at him. I'm like, why though?
Yeah.
But like, also a serious question, if they took this part out, including the bookend line later of, dude, you want to fight, does anything actually change? Like, do we lose anything?
No,
I don't see how this
all.
particular aspect of Steve's... I mean, I have to confess, though, I do love Matarazzo's delivery of, because it looked like he beat the shit out of you. Like, I did like that line a lot. Because I mean, to Matarazzo's credit, like something I've said a couple episodes in a row now, is the fact that there are moments between the two of them where they both could have played the scene bigger. Mm-hmm. And that's actually something I think that differentiates them from the way Harbour is playing Hopper this season. I love Harbour as an actor, but I do think that like his choices were to go bigger and broader. Yeah. And actually this moment, for all that none of us clearly like this moment, but he does play it pretty, I mean, maybe as actors you can speak more to this, but like it seems like he plays it, like when he says that about, because it looked like he beat the shit out of you, like he's very grounded in how, he's not going, because it looked like he beat the, like he's not giving him a hard time. He's very serious, like, you're not the person for this job.
It definitely feels like Dustin in that moment is like, this is not a good idea, dude. Like, just think about this for a second, which is, it makes it, I think, a little bit more comedic. Yeah. I always love when actors play something so serious, because it often does make it hysterical.
Given the seriousness, do you think that Dustin has lost a little bit of faith in Steve's ability to do things?
I don't think so.
That's a fascinating question.
That's a good question.
I agree with Heather. I don't think so.
Yeah.
I think they've just gotten to a point that they have a brotherhood, so they're gonna pick on each other. You know, like that's the way you can speak to how brothers are.
Yeah.
Like, but there's an element of like they know each other now.
Is it in this episode though? Like, if you die, I die.
It is. It is here. Yep.
Yeah.
So I kind of feel like the show is still punishing Steve for mistakes that he made 2 years ago.
Yeah.
Even though I feel like it is so abundantly clear that he is not that guy anymore.
Oh, sure.
And it's like,
it almost like
why?
like you're saying at the beginning of the season when they're keeping the track record of how he can't get girls. It's that kind of idea. Like he still thinks he's the cool guy, versus I think by the end of the second season he's pretty down to earth at that point. I mean, there's always gonna be some of that cockiness in him.
But he's definitely changed, especially by the end.
It's
of
almost
season
like the
2.
writers won't.
He's definitely.
The writers won't let him though. It's like mostly.
One thing though that kind of to Dustin's point here, and I kind of feel like it might have been, and maybe this is just me like super reading too close. One of the reasons that I think that Steve having that, absolute amazing moment at the end of season 1 when he makes that choice, when he changes his mind and he goes back in, part of the reason that moment is so successful, and actually I would say most of Steve's successes is when he doesn't do things solo, when he is working as part of a team. Because that moment, it's like he is working within the plan that Jonathan and Nancy had set up.
Whenever he's on his own, it's almost like he overcompensates.
100%.
Yep.
But when he's in a team, he knows his place. And he does.
But he has a
well.
place. He's not just one of the people. When he's part of the team, he has a very functional place.
Yeah, and
he just has to connect that here and realize, oh yeah, no, I'm valuable in this team.
Yeah, Well,
and like. And I love that moment in season 2 when it's when Dustin and Lucas are having the conversation about Max. And Steve is like, hey, let's go. And, okay, asshole, God.
Yes.
Because he's saying, like, pull your weight, be part of the team.
Right.
So, long story short, he fought a Demogorgon. I want that on record.
Yes, he did. With a bat with nails in it. Like that. Yes. That's pretty epic.
Robin goes off to get the blueprints, we'll find out later, but then we go to the Hawkins post, and Nancy and Jonathan are called into Tom's office because he appears to be fine, however sweaty and irate, and he reams them both out. And despite Nancy's insistence that Mrs. Driscoll would have died if she and Jonathan hadn't been there, Tom fires them both. This might be one of my favorite scenes in the whole series.
Yeah.
Oh,
this scene is so good.
And the cinematography in this moment
is
probably my favorite out of the entire show. That moment when he kicks the chair and everything is jaunted after that.
All the Dutch angles, all of a sudden, right there.
It just was like, if you don't know, now you know what's happening.
Yeah.
Like, it's so good.
And think about how it's not just a reprimand. there's something otherworldly about the way that he's communicating here too.
Way more angry than he should be.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know though. I think that's part of what makes it so powerful is because everything he's saying actually has like a ring of truth to it.
Does.
It's like
it does.
And something that Jenna and I talked about is how like this is the kind of not all of it because it's a little extreme, but a little of this energy is what should have been there. This is the lack of this is why those moments in the boardroom or in the conference room are so sexist is because they're just laughing at her and it's like they don't take her seriously.
There's
and
no,
then
groundedness there.
When he kicks that chair, it was like I noticed that the first time I watched it. I've noticed it every time since, and it's not like an extreme Dutch angle.
Yeah.
It's just
very
enough
slight.
off keel to be like, and something is.
It's enough to be like,
off here.
Nancy or Jonathan, one of you, please notice something is off. Like it almost, as an audience member, you're like, please notice.
Yeah.
Obviously, we know they're not seeing the camera angle, but there's some element of like, as an audience member in that moment, you're like, oh, I hope they get it. I hope they see something's weird here. I hope that, like, it just creates such a good involvement for the audience. I love that.
And I don't know if this was direction or their own choices, and probably a combo, but I love the difference in Jonathan and Nancy's postures and their mannerisms because Jonathan is head down, pick point on desk and stare, like, because he knows, he's like, I knew this is what he's like bracing for the announcement. And Nancy, though, before she starts arguing back, she's like wide-eyed and she's like watching him, she's alert, and that leads to like what you were just saying, like about please notice, because she does. But it's like I love that difference. Like it leads so beautifully into that argument they're gonna have in the car.
Totally. Yeah, it's gosh, that's a great scene. I also, just a little like fun little Easter egg, that actor is he used to be in all of the 90s, 2000s soap operas.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay.
I think it was Young and the Restless. It might have been Young and the Restless or Bold and the Beautiful. Or maybe As the World Turns. My mom used to watch them all the time, but I saw him and I was like, is that, oh, wait, no, that's how I know that guy. So
Tom says, but you didn't know that. And then later Nancy says, I didn't know that. But it doesn't, the rest of it is so good that you don't even notice.
Yeah, I didn't even notice that.
Oh, yeah. You're right. I was captivated by the performances.
This is my second like go-to example of balance, because a lot of what Tom is saying, like, you know, he's not out and out wrong. It's but Nancy's right too, because when she even says she would have died, he just completely disregards it. He doesn't say anything. So he just moves on to the next thing. So even the slight Dutch angles kind of speak to the imbalance of what's happened.
True,
it's great.
Such a well acted, well edited, well written, well paced scene. It's just all of the elements are there to make it a really
really like
package.
Nancy in this episode.
Yeah.
I really like Nancy in this episode.
In watching it the first time, until that final movement of chapter 3 with the stuff with the Holloway's home with Billy, as the kids say, I was straight up not having a good time. And so when this scene played out, I was like completely, fully, 100%, this is the show that I fell in love with. I'm totally back on board.
Yeah.
Really?
Totally.
Okay.
Yep, totally.
This scene is top notch.
So good.
Yes.
And then this is when we get Will's full explanation of what's been going on and his premonitions of the Mind Flayer's return. Perhaps the piece of the Mind Flayer that they exorcised out of him got locked in their world, and if so, it would need a new host. When Will looks at 11 and they lock eyes, I think this is the first proper exchange between them that we have seen.
Ever.
Not in the Upside Down, not through some kind of her reaching out to him psionically.
Yeah.
This is the first time they, like, I think have made eye contact almost the entire show at all.
Yeah.
Plus it's a moment between them.
Yeah.
And they're the only two that really understand everything going on.
Exactly.
So it's really cool.
There is absolutely no romance between Will and Elle for a myriad of reasons. And the fact that there's nothing else going on. Everything is very straightforward between those two characters. And for that reason, that moment is like between those two is like, I would even go as far as to say it's electrifying, because it's like, it's this click of connection. And I'm like, yeah, why have you two not been hanging out more?
Right.
Right.
I think you'd like hanging out with Elle a lot more anyway.
Yeah.
Like something Heidi said, I don't know if it actually made it into the episode or not, but something that she said was, like, these two characters collectively have the most knowledge of the Upside Down and the Mind Flayer. And yet they haven't been hanging out. Like, it's just interesting.
They haven't
like,
been having little huddles of their own, being like, "What did you see? I don't know. What did you see?" And then trying to figure this thing out,
Right.
and then go and explain it to their friends. You know?
Yeah.
like intense, right? Hey, also thank you. Like, you know,
It's a scene like this that I think I've been looking forward to from the beginning of the season, where there's just this shift now. We're moving into the next act.
As we're kind of seeing Mind Flayer stuff happen, I was like, okay, so what is happening? What's really going on? What's all the big deal here? And we're kind of speculating, and I'm looking up stuff. And then we get to this scene, and it's like, I almost kind of want them to question it a little bit, so we have a little bit of suspense. There's a little bit of, here's what's happening. We already know the answer, basically. I was like, oh, okay.
Max makes a really good point. I mean, which is actually kind of what you were speaking to, Heather. Like, the demodogs died when El closed the gate. When the mind dies, the body dies. And Mike's response is, well, we can't take any chances. But they don't ever actually address, as far as I remember, how this happened. They just like, yep, we don't know. Just go with it.
I think we're going to find that answer in season 4.
But from there, Hopper and Joyce pop over to City Hall. And that's when Hopper questions Klein about the Terminator.
This
That
scene
is
so
a
much.
great scene.
I love this scene.
I felt like we got our Hopper back in this moment.
Yeah, what I love in this scene is the shift of power. Even not just in their words and what they're saying or their tone, but even their body language. There are moments where, okay, Klein thinks he's in control at first, but Hopper really has the upper hand because he's the one questioning Klein. He's like, I have dirt on you. And then yeah. The balance thing again. And then, you know, Klein's kind of in this position of he's trying to defend himself and everything. And then finally Hopper starts getting a little more serious, and he's like, he starts talking about it, the affair, and you see Hopper lean forward. And Klein's like, "You want to play this game? This isn't a game." And then all of a sudden tables turn. Klein starts calling him out. And you see Hopper sit back, and he puts his hand up by his mouth and everything, and it's like he's trying to think, how am I gonna come back from this, because he's right. And then he just goes full.
Let's just straighten him up. Yeah.
This is, you know what, words are not doing it, so we're gonna go break your nose.
This sequence actually reminded me a lot of the scene in season 1 when he goes to the bar, because the guy like goes, "Thanks for ruining the game," and then Hopper's like, okay. And then the next thing you see is him like shoving this guy against the wall. So it reminded me very much of like, it's a callback to that.
Yes,
I don't know if that was intentional, but that's certainly what it made me think of.
Yeah. And the little lines from Joyce were a nice touch.
Who are you calling? The police?
Yeah. Yeah, the one-liners in it were fun. But I did enjoy from a storytelling perspective to see that kind of that balance of power shift. Mm-hmm. It felt very natural.
Yeah, this is in my notes I have, this is very like Hopper on the case.
Yes.
And I like that.
Yeah.
Although I did think it was a little brazen of them to reference Arnold Schwarzenegger directly.
Oh yeah,
like,
that was a little.
I was like, just
on
because
the
it's meta
nose.
doesn't mean you get away with it.
Yeah.
A little on the nose.
Yeah. It was funny. You know, he's
definitely is funny.
trying to be all snarky and like, yeah.
But it
his
is
name
so on the nose.
Yeah.
But all in all, yeah, I agree. It's a great scene. It's very back on form. And after that scene, we finally get the argument between Nancy and Jonathan in the car.
I love this moment.
When I first figured out the balance theme, I was like, this was the scene that made me figure it out.
Yeah.
Because it's so balanced. This whole argument, it's like they are both right and they are both wrong.
Right.
Yep.
I love that finally, like, he hits his limit. Like, he's like, I can't, Nancy, I can't anymore. Like, you are taking me for granted. You're taking your lifestyle for granted.
Right. Yep.
Because I bristled quite significantly when she says, "You sound just like them." I'm like, no, he doesn't.
Totally. Yeah, no,
he's speaking from his own
pain, his own life, you know, but as any teenage relationship, it's not done very tactfully and
Right.
Well, and she is right. I
Yeah,
mean, she
totally.
like, she's, you know, like, and I love the fact that towards the conclusion that when she says, "You don't know what it's like," that I'm so glad that he said, "Neither do you," because they're both speaking from very specific experience.
Yeah, their own separate ones. They're not classic counseling session here. Learn to listen to the other person before you speak.
Totally.
And, you know, it's like they're not doing this.
They're not able to hear each other, even though they're both absolutely correct in what they're saying.
They're on two different planes.
Yep.
Well, again, they are both right, but they are also both wrong. One particular thing that stands out to me about this episode that's different from everything else this season in terms of behind the scenes information and crew is that this is the first episode this season that is written by a woman. Kate Treffry or Kate Treffry. I'm not sure how to pronounce her name. She is also the same person that was stood in for the Demodog in chapter 2.
What?
Yeah, there's in Beyond Stranger Things, there's this whole thing where they talk about Bob's death and how they needed someone to stand in to be the Demogorgon or the Demodog that like basically knocks him down and then really is the one that
Eats him.
makes it inevitable.
Yeah. Oh, wow.
And that's her. That's this woman.
Wow.
And I remember noticing that like I do think I think this, I mean, even for the quibbles in the writing we've talked about, I do think this is the strongest written episode.
I would agree.
And and I keep checking IMDb, like, did she write anything for season 4? And they haven't released any of the credentials for any of that yet, but I've been checking, so we'll see how this comment ages. Yeah. But I remember being like noticing the difference in the writing and being like, now, this episode is also directed by Sean Levy. I'm sure there are male writers that can write from that perspective, right. But I'm really glad that particular scene was written by a woman because it proves in the pudding. Like, that scene is incredible. And I think that this scene is written so eloquently in terms of how deftly you get both of these perspectives and how it's like a tennis match. Like you're watching this. I mean, because even her line about like, oh, here comes the Oliver Twist routine. I was like, excuse. Right?
Yeah. It felt like a natural conversation that would happen from two different perspectives, trying to address two different issues.
And I think it says so much about their relationship. They have never probably ever sat down and had these conversations. They're there in a relationship with each other because of their trauma. Yeah. And this conversation's like, oh yeah, they've never talked about this stuff. They have no idea what the other world is like. Mm-hmm. They've never tried to sit down and ask each other.
Part of what I think also makes this scene so great is that we've really been building to it, and it's been very the craft of building this the pieces of this conflict that's been brewing, and because every time you can see Jonathan going, I don't think we should it's not worth getting fired over. So yeah, the scene is, in spite of how like hard it is to watch in some ways, it's so rewarding. Yeah. Another one of those like up in the top 10 moments of the whole series. Absolutely. It's so well done.
I think, rewatching it this afternoon, I was just like, wow, this episode is just, in general, very solid.
Moments like this make it stand out all the more because of what surrounds it.
Yes.
Yeah. Such a great scene. Back at Scoops Ahoy, Robin returns with the blueprints to the mall, including the air ducts, and that they formulate said plan. And not even Dustin can fit. And Erica Sinclair interrupts the boys' futile attempt to wedge Dustin into the vent, ringing the bell, demanding more samples. Robin, however, gets another idea. And I don't love the joke with Steve trying to push Dustin's ass through the vent. Like, why? But
I thought it was just funny.
Erica going, ahoy, ahoy. Yeah. I actually did. I was laughing pretty hard at that.
For me, it's just the line, touch my butt, I don't care.
And to me, that line just felt so Dustin.
Yeah. True.
It just was true. So in character.
Yeah, it's just...
That's Dustin.
Right. And it has to be him and Steve. Like, that joke would not have worked with any other characters.
Totally.
Not even... I don't even think with any of the other kids. I think it's because they've been having that bickering all this time, you know.
Lucas is probably the only one that I'd be like, maybe Lucas.
Lucas.
Yeah.
Maybe. Yeah. It seems out of place, but, it's funny.
It was a cheap laugh, and I loved it.
I think moments like that, you get to a joke like this. I don't love it, but I roll with it because there's enough about it that, like you said, it's a cheap laugh. Yeah. But at the same time, there's enough goodwill surrounding it, and it's just grounded enough that it's still enjoyable. It doesn't have the same kind of like jarring effect that some of the other humor does.
Yeah, yes,
totally.
Yes.
At the pool, the kids spy on Billy from outside, and he's almost completely covered up in a long sleeve shirt and towel.
That cracks me up every time.
How disappointing.
Well, Mike even comments,
it gets pointed out.
Is it Mike or Lucas? One of them says, like, how often have you seen him with a shirt on?
Yeah.
Right.
Oh my gosh.
That's when Will says the thing about, like, well, he keeps you dormant until you're activated. Mike gets an idea, and he has the boys only follow him into the locker room and through the gym, until he stops at the sauna and Mike breaks down his proposed plan that they try to trap Billy in there and burn it out of him. I love this moment too because they're acting like themselves again.
Spycraft on their side.
When they go through, I'm sorry, no public pool that I ever went to had a weight room and a sauna.
Yeah.
What? Is that a thing? Is that like the joke?
Not that I know of, yeah.
Well, because there's the joke in a lot of TV about like how the girls' room has like the couch and stuff, which like, but like, so I'm like, is this like a joke where like, well, of course the men's locker room has like a weight room and like,
Yeah, I don't know. I don't remember
Been
that.
a lot of public, like I said, public restrooms, a lot of public pools in my life, and I've been on both sides.
I don't.
Usually just a locker room.
I don't know. I know that there may be saunas.
saunas feels less
that
real.
feels like that makes sense, but yeah.
But yeah, when you've got the locker room, you've got the weights.
I mean, maybe that was a thing in the 80s, and maybe that's changed, and we just I
that's
don't know.
true.
But
Yeah,
it could be a period thing.
Yeah.
But even the sauna, like I was just thinking, well, like, because my mind jumped to when I used to go to a gym and I had a gym membership. I'm like, well, right, because the gym had the pool that was at the gym. It's not a pool, it's a gym. But I don't know. I mean, like, I buy the sauna for some reason, but the weights, I was like, what? Huh?
Yeah,
At
right?
a pool.
Yeah, there's no explanation.
Are we just trying to show that this is a man's place here with all of the weights and all this stuff? I don't know.
To some degree, you get all of the props that you have in the big finale.
Exactly.
Yeah,
but,
yeah.
And
That's,
maybe
that's true for that part of the episode. Yeah.
Maybe that's literally all it was for.
That's true. They could have just put it in there.
I don't know why Mike had to keep the plan hidden from the girls.
You talking about when they like boys only? If you're all trying to come up with a plan, what is the purpose of the boys leaving and saying boys only,
followed by the line, trust me?
Right.
Yeah.
It
felt like the whole interaction in the next few bits between the guys and the girls felt like they were symbolically trying to show that they were still not quite together all the way yet.
Erica considers the vent and says that she'll fit, but she wants to know what's in it for her. And why should she do it at all? And they subsequently bribe her with free ice cream for life after she gives a little speech about capitalism and she agrees to cooperate.
What an
Can't have America without Erica.
Yeah, what an interesting character.
Yeah, that whole scene I felt like was literally just exposition so we understand Erica a little bit more.
It has a much better rewatch value than it does the first time through. Because the first time through, I was like, I really like her. I love Priya Ferguson, but I'm like,
how does she fit in here? Like, to you, did it feel like she was like just kind of plopped in there?
I think just her. I think they have a really good plan for her. I think that her intro is a little rocky.
Yeah.
I agree.
But totally worth it.
Yeah, that's
She's hysterical.
She's hysterical.
Meanwhile, Klein, Hopper, and Joyce arrive at Klein's house. I love the exchange about the zebra rug.
Yeah.
I didn't actually kill that. No shit. And then that's when he shows Joyce and Hopper the financial records, still insisting that it's all dangerous, and Joyce picks up on the property's proximity to the power plant instead of the lab, and she repeats what Scott Clark said about needing the big source of energy. So the source isn't at the lab because it's there. This moment is so nice because we get a real scene between them teaming up and working together. And Hopper even doubles back on that awful line about sticking to sales. He says that she should come work for him at the police station instead. It's terrific.
And it was such an adorable moment between
so
them
endearing.
because you're like, this is when like your heart's tugging. You're like, oh please, I want this to work. I really want this to work.
And especially because it felt like such a step forward because she mentioned Scott Clark and he doesn't comment on it. He doesn't get nasty about it. He just, and then like when she's, and like they actually have like, this like little romantic beat. It's great.
Yeah, it's great. Yeah, it's so good.
I don't know what they're gonna do. I mean, obviously they're not in Hawkins in season 4, but like, dude, I loved the idea of her teaming up with Hopper.
Oh yeah, I love that.
But it also is this like step forward because you are getting this openly romantic exchange between them that's not conflict driven. It's actually like they're actually arriving at the same place. And yeah.
And it's not forced either. It's they come to that very natural conclusion.
The romantic beat is interrupted, however, by the sound of Klein trying to escape out the window. But Hopper catches him, and just in time.
Is that the moment where,
That is such
where
a-
he
like,
throws
pulls him out the
he
window.
throws him, after pulling him, he throws him and he just goes "Ah!" off screen.
Yes, that was
funny.
just fun.
This was fun.
At the Wheeler home, Karen knocks on Nancy's door, but to no answer. And Nancy does come out and confides in her. And I love the metaphor of that moment with Karen, that one shot on the stairs, because it's only after Karen respects that boundary that Nancy comes out. Like it's again another step forward in their relationship. Yeah. And it's beautiful, and it's just such a nice callback too to season 1 and 2.
Yeah, and
this scene is my absolute favorite
in the kitchen.
In all of Stranger Things. It's the most human and honest and raw, and it makes sense knowing it's a female writer now. I've had moments like that with my mom where, we did not get along, me being a teenager, even through college, until I moved out on my own. And then finally had that moment of, you know what, Mom, I'm actually more like you than I'd like to admit, but I get this from you. Like, this is where this comes from. And the moments where they're joking about the dad, it's just, it's such a great moment. It's finally, like, good, wholesome moment. And this is the first time we see Karen as, like, a whole character. She's not just the mom.
Yeah,
She's
there's a line that she says in there where she starts talking about this world. It's hard, and
it's hard out there, Nancy.
And it's hard out there. I forget her exact words, but I noticed she starts to say "I." And
she cuts herself off.
It's not just about her in this moment. She's trying to pass encouragement on to her daughter and empower her, and she's speaking from her experience.
And speaking probably from missed opportunities, from times that she didn't keep going. And
yeah.
Karen Wheeler, one of the most beautiful things about doing this podcast has actually been re-examining that character. Mm-hmm. And I have become very, very fond of Karen. And it's been really wonderful to come to this point and see her, at this point. I think one of the things that makes this moment so powerful is the fact that, for one thing, it is a Bechdel Wallace pass, which, hell yeah. But also, in the beginning of the scene, Nancy acknowledges that Jonathan was right and that she was solely focused on her own ambitions, not thinking about him or anyone else. And she continues then to say that she wanted so badly to be right because, as Karen understands, then she would be exactly what they said she was, just a dumb kid who doesn't know what she's doing. But again, balance. It doesn't have to fully make Nancy wrong, and it doesn't have to make Jonathan wrong. The scene as a whole, it focuses on her and gives her the freedom to be right and finish the story without having to tear him down. And yet also acknowledging her own mistake.
Yeah.
That's just so beautiful.
Yeah, it is. This feels like the moment where she goes from girl to woman. Mom is comforting her to start. And then by the end, she's like, no, Mom, I got this from you. We're on the same field here. I'm now a woman. And it's just so good.
The scene does not feel preachy. What they're dealing with in this moment it's such a fine line to walk, and they really just nail it.
I would change absolutely nothing about this scene. It is just perfect. And even from an acting standpoint, you could study this in an acting class. Like, it's just, it's so well done.
It's so good.
In a scene where it's so easily they both could have complained about the men in their lives. Mm-hmm. It's not what it was about.
Yep.
And that's what makes it a Bechdel Wallace pass, because they don't, they do, she does mention Jonathan at the beginning, but I would argue that the focus of their dialogue is about each other and about...
Exactly. Right. Yeah, she's talking about her mistake with Jonathan, not so much about Jonathan himself. I like that.
It's great. This is when the kids prepare their trap for Billy, and Lucas tries to apologize to Will about the previous day, but Will brushes him off. I think Lucas really does feel bad about what happened. It does make me wonder, again, though, how much did Mike tell him? That missing scene I mentioned last episode would have added a lot to this moment.
Will as an actor is just so good. He's probably my favorite out of the kids, besides, I think, 11, obviously. And I just absolutely, that moment was just so good. He's like, seriously, dude, we've got more to worry about. This is just so not a big deal. And it might actually bother him what happened, but at the same time, he's like, can we just, grow up a little bit here? I don't know. I just really liked his responses and the way they were delivered in that moment.
And I think it says a lot that Lucas is the one who approaches him at this point, and Mike doesn't. Mike's over there with Elle. Speaking of which, Mike jokes around with the dummy, with Elle, who is unimpressed and continues to give him the cold shoulder, so Mike finally tells her about Hopper's threats. But Elle is unmoved. Mike tells her that she's the most important thing in the world to him, but she cuts him off, pondering whether Hop is right. Maybe they are spending too much time together. And she paraphrases back to him what he said about her being a different species, and maybe she should be with her species more. And when Mike pieces it together, he's shocked and angry. Again, balance, like her frustration with him and the point about spending time with other people, including other girls, that's valid. But so is his indignation. That was a violation of his privacy. They're both right.
Right.
Yep. In spite of how, like, slightly grating some of this interaction is, I do actually like their dynamic here, especially the way, like, he jokes with the dummy. That felt very season 1 Mike to me.
Yes. Yep. I love the parallel, though, between those two apology scenes happening pretty much back to back. Like, I just loved, it just was really an interesting placement of those.
Well, and I do like his apology. It's just, it has, I think Elle's reaction is too little too late. Like, and again, when I said back in episode 2 was this, I don't know why this exchange of words didn't happen then.
Yeah.
It doesn't make sense to me, like, why he didn't just tell her that.
It feels like both for Lucas and for Mike at this moment, it feels like they're like, okay, well, this is another one of those nights where you might die. I might as well get the stuff off my chest before we die.
Yeah.
Like, first, it's the worst timing for an apology for both of them. I'm like, y'all are idiots.
Why are we going into this now? You just talked about trying to set up this trap for Billy. And now you're also trying to bring in your own personal
like that has to be the reason why they're doing it in that moment. I'm like, oh, they're just stupid.
But I weirdly though I buy it.
Yeah.
Like,
oh yeah.
Well, absolutely.
No, it does make sense. Where it's like, hey, we're about to go into this really, like, we may not come back from this. If this is the last time that I see you, I just want you to know that I'm sorry.
Yeah, that's what it feels like for both of them. I'm like, y'all. But I love Elle bringing in, like, maybe I should spend more time with my own species. Like, there's a lot of, like, clearly these are conversations she and Max had at their sleepover, and, like, it's just really fun. They're bringing the girl talk in.
And it does feel authentic for that age range.
It does.
Perfect.
It does.
And then that's when we get the scene outside where Max is watching and says, I hope it's not you.
Man, I love Max's arc throughout this whole episode. I think she might be my favorite in this episode of things that happened to her and her arc, because she goes from, no, it's not Billy. Billy's not a murderer. Everything's fine, guys. Like, it's not a big deal. To this moment where she's like, okay, it is a little weird, but I still don't want to believe it. It takes her until she's standing in the doorway with him crying before she's like, okay, something is weird here.
The moment where she's just by herself and she says, please don't let it be you. I'm curious what you guys think of that. I mean, we don't want her to find out, but we do, because if she does, then they progress in trying to solve the problem.
It seems like Billy as a character has really, for lack of a better term, has kind of split the room. There seems to be a lot of division among the fandom about, like, where you stand with Billy. Because, like, I think what started in this moment when she says, I hope it's not you, my question is, why? Like, genuinely, like, why?
Yeah, true.
Where is that coming from?
True.
That moment, I forget which episode it's in, but that moment when she's in the car and he says, well, she's like, well, what would I do without you? And he grabs her wrist. And the way she looks so scared of him, and I don't mind the idea of, like, creating this, like, really complex, gray relationship between them, but I feel like they just completely ignore that part.
I agree with that. There's something about, they never follow up with him resolving his own trauma from his father. We never really return to that ever in season 3 because he's flayed from the beginning. He has that little moment at the end, but there are dynamics about his character that we just never got to explore more and tie up, and like you're saying with his relationship with Max, like, it's still strained at this point. So where did this genuine care for him come from? I guess just because they're half siblings. And
again, I think it's not so much of, like, oh, I don't like what's here. It's like, I don't think there's enough depth to this. I think they didn't explore it, and kind of, it's a lot of yes and.
Yeah, there's a lot of, you just have to kind of accept, and like you said, there's a lot of stuff just left out and unexplained that we as an audience have to fill in the gaps.
I mean, because the only other thought I had for the please not you was that maybe that's coming from a place of, please don't let this be, like, our story. Like, this is how it has to end.
Right. We're creating sympathy for Billy in order for him to play the part that he needs to in this season.
Then at Starcourt, Erica crawls through the vents and we get our Die Hard reference.
That is my one complaint about this situation. It does not feel well thought out. They have no idea what's in that room, and they're just like, well, the guards are going to be gone. How do they not know someone's in that room?
Right, and they're going to send a 9-year-old kid in there.
Yeah, it doesn't
The only thing I can chalk it up to is that it's just they're still too young to understand the repercussions of
Which is
their
true.
decisions.
Psychologically, your brain does not develop the understanding of
Consequences.
circumstances
Robin
until
should know
25.
better.
Right.
Well, Steve looks really nervous too when he's like, he looks really nervous. And when she makes it to the room and tells them what she sees, I howled to her at her response to Robin's question about the booby traps. Well, if I could see them, then they'd be pretty shit traps. I was like, I was dying because I forgot that she said that, and I was laughing
It's
so
so good.
hard. And then Steve looking nervous, and then he takes that big breath of relief once she says I'm in. Like he's like, oh,
Yeah, right. Like he's been freaking out the dad at
Here's
home.
an interesting, just a side note. Like he is the babysitter.
He is.
Like he's Dad
is.
Steve, so he's gonna naturally feel even this attachment to Erica's safety because he's been doing this for the other kids, and it's just it's a subtle moment that some people may not catch, but he's genuinely like, I'm responsible here.
in spite of how frustrated he clearly is with her in other moments. It's so sweet. I don't know.
So good.
She comes down, opens the door. Free ice cream for life. And then this is when we move into our final movement at the pool. That night, Billy showers, but as he's changing in the locker room, Mike lures him into the sauna. And yeah, the kids cooperate and lock him in. I love that the way that Elle just closes that door.
That was
arm
such
movement
a
is so good.
Great shot. I mean, just so dynamic.
Billy tries to zero in on Max when she says do it, and Will cranks up the temperature. And I love how after they first lock him in, it still feels dangerous. Like the kids look nervous. Like even though we get that moment, that like badass moment from Elle, like they all still look like, okay.
They still don't know what's going to happen.
There are so many moments throughout this section before we realize, okay, the mind flayer is in him, which we know, but they don't know this yet. And so it's an element of like, are we going to hurt him?
Right.
Like, are we going to do something really bad here?
Yeah.
Like there is that element of that suspense. They just don't know yet.
As a 90s kid, again, they've referenced some 90s things, but not usually. So I don't know if this was their intention or not, but like I got such strong Hocus Pocus vibes from this. Like when they lock the witches in the kiln, I think is what it is. It reminded me a lot of that.
I could see that. I didn't even think about that watching it, but now that you say that, there is some element of that for sure.
Swing back to Starcourt, where Steve cuts open one of the Imperial Panda boxes to find, well, as he says, not Chinese food. And this is when he tells them to step back, but Dustin refuses. You die, I die.
Brotherhood.
And I love the way, like, we get enough of a moment to, like, appreciate that, and then, okay.
This is the
It's just
timing
you
there.
can see in Steve's mind, he's processing, okay, I really should tell him to stand down, but he's not going to listen to me. So whatever, let's just get on with it.
Yeah.
But before, and then, of course, that's when he pulls the canister out, which full of the green liquid, and before they can examine it further, the room shutters. Erica whispers, booby traps. And then the control panel doesn't do anything. They all start yelling, and the room makes more noises, shakes again, and then plunges downward. And everyone's screaming except for Steve, who just, like, kind of looks the room over. And I liked that. I liked that Steve actually has the moment of wherewithal to be like, I mean, granted, he does go, oh shit. But, you know, but he does look around, like, kind of trying to at least
trying to figure it out,
wrap his
trying
mind
to
around it.
assess the situation.
And then we have the privilege of seeing the outside shot of it, that it is an elevator and it's plummeting.
Yeah.
Tower of Terror.
Yeah. Well, then this is when we move into the intercutting between the sauna test and Nancy at the hospital. While Nancy scribbles furiously, noting what, I wonder? That's when Miss Driscoll's heart rate starts to go up and her breathing strains. And Billy slams against the sauna door and shouts at Max, demanding that the kids let him out. As the heat climbs and as he shouts, he sneers, he threatens, shouts again, pounds against the door some more until he keels over, out of sight from the window, and screams. And they hear him start weeping, and Max approaches the door. When he sees her, Billy starts apologizing directly to her, saying it's not his fault and that he, quote, made me do it, a giant shadow. And he implores that she believes him. And then as she tries to comfort Billy, he covertly grabs a piece of broken tile. Will tells Mike he's here. And still looking at Will, Mike warns Max, get away from the door, then screams it at her a second time just as Billy breaks through the door's glass window. nearly stabbing her, and shouts, "Let me out, you bitch." He breaks out, and Lucas fires at him with the wrist rocket.
Yeah, there's a lot here.
Oh,
Woof. Just going to the moment where he transitions from powerful Billy, which seems so Billy, to pitiful Billy, which some element is like, is there a moment here where he's kind of tricking them? I feel like it's left up to interpretation.
I think it's both.
Yeah.
I think it's a little bit of both happening at the same time.
Because they're definitely, that mind flayer is coming into his body at that point, and maybe it's some element of that the mind flayer is like, I hear what you're saying, stop talking. He knows 11's there. Like, the mind flayer knows that. Like, don't give more information than you need to, Billy. I'm in control here. But also this element of Billy's like, I need help. I don't want to be doing this. There's something wrong here. But it's another one of those moments that just felt like we need Billy to be pitiful.
Is he mind flayer Billy when he's searching for them before he gets put in the sauna? Because that's what
I don't think so.
That's what I don't think he's normal Billy there.
Well,
he's still mind flayer Billy.
So in general,
Billy Flare.
In general, I would say that since the mind flayer has controlled Billy, Billy is a shell of himself. That the extreme emotions are so extreme. Yeah. Some of it feels a little bit over the top. And in the way that he's like, I'm going to kill you if I find you in here. It's like, there's some shell of Billy, but that's still so Billy at the same time. It's interesting.
Yeah, kind of like what we saw with Will a little bit last season. With the whole, like, I'm sorry, he made me do it. Like, you know.
Right. Well, there are moments where you see the true Billy. And I think when he's lying there crying, talking to Max, I do think that is the true Billy coming to for a moment, realizing his body's been not in his control for some of this horrifying things that he's done. And he's trying to plead with her, I didn't want to do this. Right. I probably even thinking like, I know I've done some bad things, but I did not want to do this. There is something else going on, like you said. And the mind flayer is like, zip it.
And
stop.
The juxtaposition of the words that are coming out of his mouth and what the actions of his hands are doing at the same time is a really cool transition moment.
Right.
I think in 2019, I think since Heidi's interpretation was, he thinks he's dying. I'm being taken over. I probably won't survive. So before I die, before the last of me is stripped away, I need you to know this. Weirdly, I actually don't know where I fall on a lot of this. I think there's a lot of gray area. I think, like you said, Heather, there's a lot of room for interpretation. I think there's a little bit of double meaning in this scene. I don't think they intended this. I think this is me, close reading. He made me do it. A giant shadow. I think you could easily make an argument that he's talking about his father. That and maybe I'm like really slow to get here, but because it occurred to me that even when Elle sees his history later, it's kind of this big storm thing. I mean, I think partly that's just the way that it manifests in the astral plane or whatever. Like, especially because we've been talking about like hurt people. He's been abused himself, so I think it could even be that maybe even Billy isn't intending to say this, but it's true nonetheless. Yeah. And I found that really interesting. That like, especially if I think part of how I arrived at that idea was because Heidi's saying, if this is him dying, he wants to tell Max this, that maybe that's also part of where this, like, you know, quote unquote deathbed confession is also coming from. I remember like really being very like secure in that interpretation and like that's absolutely what's going on here. Then when I watched it like this one last time, I was like, no, there's one thing he says that I think negates that interpretation, but I think I kind of choose to ignore it because I like it so much. It helps get over this like hump of like, where did this version come from? And it explains so much about it. It kind of becomes this especially if it wasn't their intention, it becomes this like inadvertent, like this connecting this bridge between where the season goes and where we've been.
Right. Yeah.
But again, that might be me like really like projecting a lot of how I would have handled his arc. Yeah. But I like it.
I wonder how much of that moment of him getting so desperate all of a sudden, almost like he's apologizing for what he's about to do. Versus,
that's true. Yeah.
Like, you know, like he's like, I've done all these things and I didn't want to do them. He made me do them and he's coming, basically. It's almost a warning. It feels like something bad is coming and I know it's coming and I need you guys to know it's not me.
And I love the moment with Lucas and the wrist rocket.
Yeah, that was so good.
Knocks him back.
It knocks him fully out. But notice how it kind of almost activates the
mind
flare on steroids. You know, it's like
Yeah,
you
it
know,
pisses him off.
the knockout, all of a sudden, it's like, oh, now the beast is angry, you know?
Yeah.
Well, because, that's what makes, like, the veins start to
Yeah.
pop out. And I love, this is one of our early moments of Elle throwing her arms out in front of everyone.
Yeah.
I love the whole, he can't get through that. And it's like, yes, he can. And he and Elle face off. She enters beast mode, man. Like, she pins him to the wall with the barbell, and it nearly crushes him.
I mean, I'm thinking, Elle's gonna straight up kill Billy.
Kill him, yeah.
And like, what
Such
is
a
Max
good-
gonna think of it? What is Max thinking in this moment? Like, and she's probably just traumatized from what Billy just shouted at her, but then also watching Elle pushing this with the barbell against his neck, and it's like, I mean, yeah, you have to get rid of this thing, but Billy's gonna die. Like, oh my gosh.
Except he doesn't, though. He does overpower her.
Yeah.
And he catches her, and he starts strangling her until Mike attacks him with the pipe.
So painful to watch. Because no one moves. You're like, is anyone gonna
Yeah.
do something?
Yeah.
Well, the thing I think that makes that moment so incredible is it's because he actually looks over at them when he first grabs her, and it's I mean, like, that is true horror. That, to me, that's like a quintessential definition of like true horror.
Totally.
Like, because Mike does try, and if 11 hadn't rallied,
Yeah.
he'd have killed Mike.
Yeah.
It's like they are kind of powerless, and
Yeah,
it
and
shows
he knows
you.
it. He knows it. He's saying, I am about to kill your only out in this situation, and you're gonna watch.
Yeah.
And it's
Well, and
like-
and also like, and the way it's handled with the way the sound like drops out for a moment, and then the music comes in and the sounds slowly trickle back in. But like, I think that solidifies this idea that like, yeah, you guys rely on her a lot, and this sets up so beautifully what Mike will say in a couple episodes, which is like, you guys take her for granted. Which I think is also him projecting a little bit, but I'll talk about that when I get to that episode. But like, the idea that it's like, yeah, without her, and I think it that also instills in her like why she needs to just keep going, and it before he overpowers her, I love her just like completely in her power, like, I am taking you out.
Yeah. No holding back.
Yeah, I love this like oscillation, but you were talking about in the power dynamic shifting between Hopper and Klein. Like, I love how the way it oscillates between Billy Flair and Elle in this sequence, because it's like when she is really powerful, and yet at the same time she's just a child.
Yeah.
And this really shows you how vulnerable she is.
Yeah. Yep.
And yeah, like nearly being choked to death, Elle still manages to pull herself together enough to lift him off the ground, move in front of Mike, and throw Billy through a brick wall. Girl!
Yeah.
Right.
I love that because I felt the solidification of their relationship between Mike and Elle. Like, it just felt like, you're not going to mess with my Mike.
Yeah.
It could have been anyone else in the room. She probably still would have been the same way, but intentionally they put Mike as the victim in that moment.
And I love seeing that visual of she falls in his arms and they're both helping each other up. Like, this is what their relationship is. They've had these little squabbles in the past, but this is real.
And this is where, though, like she just went through a lot. So did he, quite
Yeah,
frankly.
yeah.
There needed to be more of them holding each other,
Oh,
I
yeah, I
think.
would've loved to see that.
I agree, but I felt like in that moment, Mike was like, we have to get out of here. Like,
But they
that's what I
don't.
got, but they
They
don't get
don't.
out.
Like,
If you're gonna stay there,
Exactly,
cuddle.
yeah,
You know,
yeah,
if you're not, get out.
It was
You
an
know,
element
either
of
get
like,
out-
I felt like that's where they were going with it. Again, not a payoff.
If you're
but-
gonna have the cinematic cuddle, do it there.
Yeah. Well, I mean, like, because the thing is, I'm not mad about the fact that then she's like, okay, I'm good. And then, like, gets to have the glare after. Like, I'm fine with that. That's fine. I
Yeah.
enjoy that. But I'm also like, but can't Mike just,
Come
like,
on,
be
let's
holding on to her while she... I don't know.
Right? Can Mike have that little? Can they
Yeah.
have like, we are a team here?
And I do love, too, how when she collapses, how the sound cuts out again for longer this time, and you just get that score. Dixon and Stein, good gracious.
Yeah.
And
Oh my gosh.
they watch him run off. And then the needle drop that starts is "We'll meet again," which is very appropriate given the look on Elle's face as she stares after Billy Flair. And then in the basement of the mill, that's when Billy tells Heather that the girl was the one who attacked and nearly killed him. She could have killed me, he says, and Heather counters, yes, but not us. And below them, a crowd of figures stand before the Mind Flayer.
That is one of the creepiest scenes.
I love how the music provides this like creepy, like weirdly, I don't know if it struck you guys this way, but this like weirdly creepy illusion that the people in the mill are the ones singing, because it's this like
Totally.
Yeah, this airy, kind of.
Oh, so creepy. The whole, it's so creepy.
So, final thoughts on chapter 4 of the Sauna Test?
Yeah, it sets up for this. What is this?
Yeah.
Okay, this is just totally creepy, totally weird, and now I need to watch the next episode.
And I love in suspense things like that. Like, we know, okay, we've got Billy, we've got Heather, we've got her parents. There's 4 people that are being controlled by the mind flayer. Okay. But then from 4 people to now we're seeing probably 30 to 50 people. Like, it's just such a fun thing to go from
and then not knowing what they mean. Like, why are all these people here? What are they going to do?
What's going on?
Our writer here, she came in and just absolutely the feeling I had at the time was that she came in and cleaned up the mess that had been left at her door. I don't know that I feel quite that strongly at this point, but I do think that she took a lot of things that felt very disjointed. She like kind of got the train back on track. Like this episode just still feels like it's in a different league.
Oh yeah. We come back to the core.
Yeah, like it has that masterful feel.
Yeah.
That the first 2 like it feels so much more controlled. Like granted, there's, as we've discussed over the course of this episode, like there clearly are a lot of plot threads that are either abandoned or lost or unclear, but I don't think that is like an issue that's specific to this episode.
Right.
I think that's a symptom of a much bigger problem, but I think this episode handles that so much better.
Right.
Like you said, it kind of gets it back on the rails, onto the right track.
Yeah.
And I think for me, like as an audience member, I almost justify so much of those split ends, if you will, just because I feel like similar to the Russo brothers with the Marvel Universe and Kevin Feige and them, it's like there are a lot of plot holes in the Marvel Universe that they're struggling with, and people are like love to point out. But I almost just accept it because so many things are so intentional. I'm like, well, maybe those are intentional too.
Yeah,
I almost feel that way with Stranger Things. Like everything's so intentional in the first 2 seasons. Surely these plot holes are intentional.
Yeah,
you know, like
there's
it's just
a reason.
Like, I almost justify it for them.
The rising actions really kicks off.
No, totally.
In this episode. Really has all of those beats where they really start to figure things out. The group starts to come back together. Finally, they find some answers.
Kate Treffrey or Kate Treefree. I did try to find the pronunciation of her name. I couldn't find it, but yeah, to me, that's the big takeaway from this episode. Like MVP, her. Well, and also, I think it's important, too, that the episode doesn't just abandon a bunch of the thread. Like, that's why I think, like, the way that I phrased it initially was she cleaned up this mess. It was more like she didn't just sever all connection. She didn't just abandon everything. She actually worked it in and, like, kept it, and in some cases kept those threads going in really beautiful ways. So I just think that's really, really impressive.
It's masterful writing there to be able to take something that's in a kind of a heap, then make some art out of it by still keeping those pieces.
The first 3 episodes were a ball of yarn, and the 4th episode, finally, we get a stitch.
Yeah.
Oh, that's great.
Poetic, yes.
And I have to say, all these years later, it's still my favorite episode of season 3.
I would agree. I think it's my favorite too.
Yeah.
So with that said, that will conclude our contemplation on chapter 4, the Sauna Test. Thank you so much for being here. This was such a blast.
Yeah,
this is great.
Yeah. Thanks. This was so I mean, this is like one of my favorite shows. So I'm
Same.
like
It's so fun to pick apart stuff.
Love talking about this, and it's just I cannot wait to see more in this world. It's so good.
Yeah. Well, listeners, if you've got comments, questions, thoughts, you can join the conversation. We're on Instagram as @coffee&contemplationpod and TikTok as Coffee in Hawkins. Like, share, subscribe wherever you get your podcasts, and please consider leaving us a review.
Thanks for listening.
Over and out. We saw Heather. She's fine. Like, I didn't even make that association.
Oh yeah, that's my name.
Yes, there you go.
We got a Heather and a Robin. Oh my god.
That's exactly right.
Hey,
I know. I literally today we were rewatching it. I was like, her name's Heather, isn't it? And then they said the
Yeah.
name, and I was like, yes, I'll never forget a Heather.
Hey, Justin is close to Dustin.
Yeah, hey,
That's close.
yeah.
That's close. It's one letter off.
We got two namesakes on this pod. I love it.